From Lolita to lollicorns, you ain't need no mop to know that we ain't on the straight and narrow no more. And I need a mop like I need a heart attack after I find out that mop actually means minor attracted person.
I'm the map!
There's an epidemic that we've been facing for far too long. And despite defending my big woman and femdom from the rise of the red pill, my big queer folk them against Turf Island, and my big disabled folk them against damn near everything, we have yet to fight for the most marginalized of them all. Children. My wife and I recently had a child, and just cause you ain't see me with my son, don't make me don't mean it's my destiny, as the absent black father myth may have you believe. And the only reason why y'all ain't see my son on YouTube like that is cause all my ops FBI, open up! I had many revelations as a new dad. The one that I was not prepared for, however, is that children really don't know nothing. I mean, nothing at all. On one hand, right, it's inspiring to see the ebullient glee that is the factory settings of life before society starts microdosing you with the black pill of bigotry. But on the other hand, this little jit barely know how to breathe. I mean, he is startled himself awake by his own farts. He gets so mad that he can't fall asleep, that it prevents him from falling asleep. I cannot make that up. Lord, what were you doing when you made children? Anyway, the point that I'm making is that children are absolutely dependent upon us for their survival. And therefore, they are at the behest of whatever circumstances we provide them. They have no autonomy, no free will. Ergo, it is incumbent upon not only the parents, but their surrounding village to practice a duty of care for all kids all around. And while the victims in today's videos aren't babies, the age gap between the victims and their abusers is wider than the gap between my teeth. And the gap between my teeth is wider than the Suez Canal. Let me tell you something. And just like child abuse is a societal failure, the abuse of the victims in today's videos is one as well. Because whether we choose to admit it or not, we, as a society, have implicitly consented to this phenomenon. And I want to know why.
I think society has mass consented to it. Up until recent times, society has obviously consented to it.
We adultify teenage girls. We treat them as young women as opposed to children.
Anytime a younger woman or a girl was with an older man, the way it would turn into like slut shaming, and it would turn into criticizing her and kind of putting the blame on the young woman.
Man, bro, when I was in high school, bro, the young niggas with money used to always come get the fine girls I wanted from school. It's like, yeah, the niggas was predators. But it happened though. It's like, yeah, and it was predatory, bro. Like, listen to yourself.
While we typically see cishet white men leading the pack of pedos, we have bore witness to a motley crew of individuals taking advantage of substantially younger partners all across the spectrum of gender, race, and sexuality. Recently, folks have spoke out against this historical trend, but make no mistake that this is a small step in a different direction, that society has trekked marathons in the next direction. With justice coming for victims all across the world, things may be optimistic for the future. But at the risk of vindicating the men en masse who constantly clamor about women and femmes them doing the same thing that they do, I must ask the question, is there a double standard for outrage?
I think there's not enough outrage for it when it's women. And you know why? Because I have dated many black men in my life. I have heard their lives, their stories, their this. Do you know how many black men have lost their virginity in the hands of some kind of sexual assault or some older woman taking advantage of them? And it is never,
in a day where romantic capitalism and transactional love is the norm, is there a defense on behalf of the young women and femdom of exploiting men in masks the same way that they have been exploited for their bodies?
Would you rather be crying in this, or would you rather be crying in a fancy car or whatever? And it's just like, I don't know. I'm like, why are we crying? But that's what my friend, I'm like, why are we crying?
And in that line of thinking, is it even possible for a woman to win at the game of patriarchy?
There's some women in my life, you know what I'm saying, that I know that I feel like they was taking advantage of by old ass dudes. You feel me? For like most of from the time they was 17 to the time they was in their mid 30s. Then some switch. And I feel like because they got kind of robbed of their adolescent childhood and being able to court men that way, I feel like it's kind of like a traumatic response almost to like the gender violence. You know what I'm saying?
Are women even able to reverse exploit men? Or are they really just exploiting themselves with more steps?
I don't blame the woman in the slightest. I think at least get some benefit from it.
Today we wend into the weird world of age gaps, sugaring, groomer panic, and more, in a quest to inquire this nuanced reality. Now, in order to understand Diddy Do It, the Pied Piper himself, as well as the feminine counterparts like Sam Taylor Johnson or Drea Michelle, we need to look at the history of older adults courting substantially younger people.
I think that there is a long history of older men being able to court, prey on, coerce younger women into being in relationships.
Now, whether it be deemed wildly inappropriate and unethical or a standard part of the societal norms in your community, the concept of age gap relationships are hotly debated and well-researched subject. History, as we'll find out shortly, isn't binary. And there are many cases of different marriages, which was always a strategic business, don't get it twisted. It was also a political and familial decision where all important interested parties considered the socio-political and economic impacts first and foremost, love secondary, if at all. Many of them called for patriarchality, a system of post-marital residence where spouses lived with the husband's family, tribe, or community. This was done with the intention of pursuing further collateral, such as property or land. Now, we're about to get into some cishet history, so bear with me, but the earliest Western records indicate age disparity relations, with the anthropological findings from the Copper and Bronze Age in Iberia indicating marriages and partnerships between older males and younger females. Because Western society draws so much, unfortunately, from classical Greece and Rome for its cultural values, we have a deeper reservoir of history to refer to when discussing heterosexual marriages when the wife is much younger than her husband. Men in both of those empires typically began getting married around 25 years old, and the wife was around 7 years younger than the husband on average. The older the man was, however, the larger the age gap. Some 50 or so age gaps in a recent study has been found to have up to 33 years in age difference, with records associating the age to women's fertility and the societal need to conceive a male heir. Epigraphic evidence points to a customary age in marriage of at least 25 years for men in all areas of the Latin-speaking empire outside the capital city for which data are available. Study of the age of women at first marriage concluded that Roman girls were often married quite young in their early or mid-teens. Now, same-sex relationships, let me get into the game. Same-sex relationships in ancient Rome, and in fact, all sexual relations, were largely predicated on notions of power, dominance, submission, and of course, social class. Wealthier women with the Greek and Roman empires also had slaves and servants, no shocker there, to find pleasure from. But if their husbands were to find out, he had the right to kill his wife's lover. A lack of action from him actually would bring upon accusations of being a pimp. However, so long as the men retained power by penetrating another man rather than being penetrated himself, they weren't stigmatized and were considered sexually virile. Concubines were also allowed and were even mentioned on tombstones. Let's add some more context. Ancient Greece is a society that some anthropologists deem before sexuality, proto-sexuality in that matter. Age played a vastly different role from that of the current era, not only through marriage, but through homoeroticism and the encouragement, celebration, and the normalization of pederasty in the poetry of Theognis and Anacreon. In Western cultures, age disparities in marriage and courtship have always been normalized in ways that are ethically dubious at best and full of sinister intent at worst. Thankfully though, we're far past the use of age gaps and men's age as a marker for being the arbiter of wisdom and discernment in matters of property or lineage. There's no dowry or old kings that require an heir to the throne. What's even more egregious though is the fact that if you are a man, you can air your dirty laundry in broad daylight. It's a status symbol for cishet men to have the sexual prowess to satisfy or date an older woman.
There is obviously a double standard, and I think it has to do with how men have historically been in power. And I think when a young man gets with an older woman, sometimes it can be seen as charity, as kind of like a wow, like you really putting in work on Mrs. whatever down the block. She really needed that. Like, so it's kind of like this thing of like honor, or you're doing like a service.
Due to the nature of celebrity and the publicity incurred, many public figures have been open about their relationships. Members of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones have admitted, bragged, and discussed their relationships pretty publicly. Most notably, Rolling Stone bassist Bill Wyman wrote in his autobiography that his girlfriend took my breath away. She was a woman at 13. Jail, les prisons. Anyway, their relationship became public only when she reached the legal age of consent in the UK, which is 16, after they met when she was 13 at an award show. Mind you now, this boy was 47 years old at the time. Bob Wyra and Phil Leach of the Grateful Dead. You know, a friend of the devil is a friend of mine. You're damn right, because you're going to hell. They are both married to women who were teenagers when they met. And let's not get started on post-modern poop cultural appropriator Elvis flickin' Presley and his grooming of Priscilla when he was 14. Let's talk about Jerry Lee Lewis marrying his teenage cousin. Filmmaker Woody Allen. Yeah, let's talk about him. Adopted, groomed, and then married his own daughter. Y'all, my dog, listen. Y'all getting me hot in there, man. Let me turn on the flicking AC because I getting tired of y'all niggas.
Can I ask what you guys think about a 48-year-old dating a 19-year-old? Because I'm kind of torn. Usually I have the mindset of, oh, if you're an adult, like, you can choose to live your life how you see fit as long as you're not harming anybody else. And these girls that date Leo, like, they know what's going on. They know that the time is limited, or at least I hope they do. But at the same time, their age difference is the same between me and my dad.
Legendary appropriator Bo Derek was originally born Mary Kathleen Collins, until she absconded to Germany at 16 by filmmaker John Derek in an attempt to avoid statutory charges. Can't say too much because I already don't think that this video about to be monetized because y'all niggas is making me sick. And let's be abundantly clear here. White cishet men have long indulged in infantile partners with impunity. Not only centuries ago, but as we live and breathe today. We know about Epstein, but we neglect to remember the folks around Epstein as well. Clinton, Trump, Prince Andrew. There's a cabal of colorless, rich, white folks that fraternize with women and femmes that never have as high-profile trials as Weinstein or Woody, if at all. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the most infamous cases next to Al Pacino, Bruce Willis, Nick Cage is almost a secret language amongst the limelight. It is a secret communication and language that communicates that having a younger partner is as much of a status symbol as your network itself.
Particular people have certain capital breed influence. And when you have certain influence, you think that your desires always mount up to your influence. Meaning, if you have high influence, you should be able to highly get whatever you desire.
a lot of the reason why these older men are going after younger women isn't even just a genuine like desire. It's a status symbol. It's a status, like what it says about them as a man, that they could get this young girl, what the assumptions are about where they're at in life, their finances, their sexual prowess, or whatever have you. So they are collecting these young girls in the same way they would collect cars or real estate or money or whatever to flash. It's like, they're sports fishing.
The money and fame simultaneously puts the spotlight on their proclivities and also protects them from penalty. I must preface this because I would be remiss not to note how white crimes are normalized and empathized in a white supremacist society so that they can do things that we, as is evident by the lawfully warranted wringing out like a wet towel of niggas like we're about to talk about. And let's talk about them. Let's talk about Robert
I don't know how to hog tie people. What would I hog tie?
Kelly marrying 15-year-old Alea.
So my age ain't nothing but a number, girl. I'm like, what you trying to say? So immediately I heard the song, I said, I called her back 15 minutes later, told her, check this out. So we cut the track right then and there.
And for the record, you are how old? That's a secret. Women doesn't disclose her age.
I making myself sick. Men like this aren't just the problem. Their parents are also deeply at fault, many of whom give celebrity geezers a pass to create victims out of their children.
It's normal or it's normalized as a way to leave certain situations. In certain spaces, it's not even glamorized, but it's essential for you to get out of certain situations. In certain households, it's taught by the very mother, grandmother as a way to escape certain financial circumstances.
There are a huge power dynamics at the intersection of age, gender, class.
Do you know what kind of power dynamic there is, imbalance there is between me and an 18 as a 30-year-old woman, an 18-year-old man or woman, or a non-binary person? Either way, the intellectual, you know how far that is?
With age comes wisdom that can only be gained through experience from balancing personal and work lives. In many cases, the career experience also means more money that you can use to bribe parents, authorities, and make things disappear. Like how Diddy made that. Anyway, I get too ahead of myself right now.
So apparently, 52-year-old Shaquille O'Neal was in Spain with this 21-year-old girlfriend. It's a 31-year age gap.
The reason why I want us to tackle the definition is because genuinely understanding how they work involves first comprehending how intricately power is distributed between individuals or groups in various situations.
If a woman is in proximity to a masculine being, that masculine being is her master. Don't get it twisted.
Power can shape the dynamics of interpersonal relationships, group dynamics, and even societal institutions. Here's some of the different metrics for power dynamics. Influence. Individuals wielding more power often sway over the thoughts, actions, and choices of others because they dictate the agenda, establish norms, and steer the conversation within our social circles and, by extension, our communities. Conflict. Fights for control emerge when people realize that there are power dynamics. Disputes arise when individuals or factions perceive that their interests or principles aren't being adequately represented, acknowledged, and heard. Resistance. When people or groups experience oppression or marginalization, they might mobilize to challenge prevailing power structures and advocate for societal transformation. Privilege and oppression. Power dynamics often perpetuate privilege and oppression, whereby those in positions of authority frequently enjoy the innumerable benefits of being at the top of the hypothetical food chain, while those with less power routinely encounter prejudice, limited opportunities, and further violence.
There's always that physical dynamic, assuming the woman is physically smaller than the man, which is often the case. Not always. I'm on the side of sex workers. But the unfortunate truth is that if you get into it at a young age, it can endanger you and that's because of how we treat sex workers. But also it can unfortunately close doors for you in other avenues. Like you've seen this. Like I remember that case. It was during COVID. A nurse was like a nighttime OnlyFans worker on the side. She got exposed and then got fired as a nurse. And it's like, we've lost a nurse.
Simply put, it's about the tug of war for influence when people interact. This concept takes on different shapes depending on the cultural backgrounds of other pertinent factors. In personal connections like friendships, marriage, or romantic relationships, power dynamics might not always be crystal clear, making them a bit of a puzzle to decipher. Yet, unraveling these dynamics is crucial for dissecting social systems and pushing for positive shifts in society.
Gradual is what people subscribe to when it comes to bigotry, right? Like, think about it. Like, that's the American way, right? Like, even the most extreme big, like, things like slavery. Think about how long America is willing to be like, you can't just expect us, you know what I mean? We need time. It's like that. It's like that about everything. Like, so think about like women's rights, when women got the right to vote, women got the right to women got the right to even like just divorce their partners. And think about how we are still living in a patriarchy, in a sexist society that doesn't pay women equally, right? So think about it. We're always on a gradual, and I mean, we're crawling.
Through scrutinizing relationships and structures of power, we uncover inequalities and spot reoccurring patterns that we can call for change. In the age of city girls and Dookie Dubai girls, the idea of having an older man with means spend money on you in return for varying degrees of access to, you, has gotten even more popular despite this not being a new invention whatsoever.
The sugar daddy was a coveted thing, right? Like getting the sugar daddy, and even what is assumed about a woman that has a sugar daddy, right? Like negative aspersions aside that people just have towards women and sex and yada yada have you. But the idea is that women who can have sugar daddies are women who are more desirable. Like that you're able to get a man to want to finance your lifestyle is a sign of, it says something about you, that you are better than the rest, right? So it all feeds into this. A lot of these dynamics have less to do with even like sexuality or sexual desire, and so much to do with like, what are we conveying to the public or to people about ourselves by being able to have these dynamics, right?
Sex work has long been commodified transactional romance, and calling it sugaring simply allows for those who subscribe to respectability politics to sidestep the stigmas associated with sex work, but get the benefits of it. Love is very rare. It's almost outlawed. Like to talk about love, to be in love, to be the sucker that falls for someone is outlawed. Like it's always the person that wins the game of love loves less. If a young lady feels as though her interactions dating-wise is not going to be one that provides the satisfaction, fulfillment of the soul that is love, if they feel as though they're not going to get that anyway, then why aren't they just going to get paid?
Love, or the idea that we were all sold of love, doesn't pan out in the same way. And I think men are experiencing the same thing too, where it's just like, it's kind of like the whole capitalist dream, for example. It's just like that falling apart. Like, oh, if you go to college and you do this and you do that, you'll be good. So I think with certain things in our society sort of falling apart or needing to be restructured, re-understood, I think there's a lot of disillusionment and hopelessness and a need to maybe feel more in control, maybe gamify certain things, play the game, get more knowledgeable of the ways in which you can be misused, used, abused, and maybe flipping it so you can at least get something at the end of the day. So ultimately, whether you're choosing to fight for love, a love that maybe is broke as hell but is real, or whether you're having to fight for a lack of love but you're paid, it's a lot of work. In both ways, you're working a lot. You're not gonna just meet a guy, gonna meet a chick that's just gonna give you everything you want, everything's gonna be great. Like, you're sacrificing a lot in a different way. So in both ways, you're kind of sacrificing.
But make no mistake, whether you're escorting an older John to dinner, replying to lewd messages in DMs in exchange for some change, or laying down with him altogether, it's still a rose by another name, which is something I'm in full support of, as sex work is work. Not to be glorified or stigmatized, It ought be treated with the same tone as a job under capitalism that exploits you. However, there's a unique soul-sucking, could have used a better choice of words, soul theft when it comes to a young woman or femme with little access to means, and sugaring is not some avenue to buy Birkins or luxurious trips, but instead she's doing it for survival.
A mother essentially, for lack of better words, selling off her daughter. It's like, in a world where you will be physically taken advantage of in one way or another, whether you are benefiting from it financially or not, you would rather have it be within a certain sort of like paradigm. Okay, marriage, okay, this is somebody that it has the funds, is somebody that has a house, has a car. So it's like, if the world is going to take advantage of your daughter and you are already in a position where you know you cannot take care of her, you're not consenting to anything in your daily life. So it's just like, what makes the most logical sense is that.
In the wake of girl boss feminism, where women are extolled for doing whatever a man can, is this empowering? Sure, you're able to squeeze some simoleons out of a daddy warbucks, but at what cost? What are the dangers associated with precarious situations for some sugar?
I think that in this conversation, I want to be very conscious of how I have internalized benevolent sexism and how I'm still in the process of unlearning it. You feel me? So a part of me think that it's a question of autonomy. How much autonomy or independence is, the older woman teaching, the young woman that's under their wing or their daughter, like how much autonomy and consent is being taught, you feel me, when you're thinking about being plucked. Because to me, it's like a part of what we're getting into is like survival skills, survival tactics. Now, there becomes a time that you have to get out of survival mode. But I think that in a world that looks to always denigrate femininity and like literally brutalize women, I think that there is rational for a older woman to teach a younger woman, you feel me, the ropes of survivability in this world, this patriarchal, sexist world that we live in.
Now, for black folks, the concept of power works with quirks due to the intersection of race, where white cishet men may perpetuate pedo and pedo-adjacent crimes, but are buffered by the barrier of whiteness from the perils of the penal system. Black men don't have that. Don't kid yourself. If you's a nigga out there, you shouldn't be doing any of this anyway, but guess what? Niggas could get catch. And that being said, black men are still men. And that means something. How often do you hear about black bishops in your Baptist church spitting about adultery on Sunday in the pulpit, but using their power over parishioners? And if this sounds eerily specific, it's because it is. Bishop Dwight Reed, a 60-year-old something man, old rusty, crusty man who got a teenager pregnant and then subsequently married her.
And I wish some of y'all would mess with my wife, Jordan. Talking about what you gonna do if you see her. Well, you will see me on the news. Let me just tell you that right now. If this was out in the streets, y'all be saying she made a come up. But you a hypocrite. And the Bible said when you find the wife, honey, you find favor with God, honey. I found some favor with God. And we sleeping good at night.
My research recalled one of the most brazen admissions of predation on behalf of a black man named Glendon Cameron. The video was so unapologetically vile that YouTube eventually had to take it down. Thus, the only vestiges are that in reaction videos.
Then this one girl, she answered the ad, we started to talk, and she was an exceptionally mature 17-year-old.
Nope.
And I picked her. She told me she was 21. That's what she told me. And
Who cares?
Like, serious question. And at this time, I have...
Did you ID her?
This chick 10, 15 times.
Oh my God. Dude, how does this keep getting worse?
The mere fact that this video existed is a condemnation on a culture that has been cultivated that engenders a person comfortable enough to say it publicly, say it loud in the first place. Black men still do occupy a position of privilege due to patriarchy, which allows them to evade things that black queer folk, femmes, and women would get pilloried for. But white men, white straight men are Captain Falcon levels of nerf and OP due to the white supremacy and patriarchy being able to bolster whatever proclivities that they may have.
The patriarchy loves like a good woman, whatever that means. And they define it in a lot of different ways, from the idea of submissiveness, of not being necessarily like affected and changed by life, by meeting somebody that's essentially a blank slate for a man to be able to kind of teach and lead and whatever, however they choose to define that. So I think when you really get down to it, the most logical choice for a lot of these men is a younger woman who is right at the beginning of her life. The fertility conversation, which is essentially rooted also in not good science, like it's like they're fertile, they're young, they're gray.
Interestingly enough, once again returning to one of the cornerstones of Western philosophy via ancient Greece and Rome, we find that age gap relationships had more to do with societal norms and pederasty than fertility. The latter being a common misconception rooted in deep-seated misogyny, which is natural given that Greek society was deeply sexist and believed that women and men had different life cycles altogether, I kid you not. Solon, a 6th century Athenian poet and policymaker, opined that Greeks identified 5 key periods in the lives of men: childhood, adolescence, when the skin changes and cheeks become covered with hair; young adulthood, when 21-year-olds become neos and are at the height of their strength and power, maturity, which comes around age 30 and is accompanied by marriage; and old age, which also comes with the height of wisdom. Women, on the other hand, only have childhood, maidenhood, known as parenthia, which lasts about 4 years, according to them, and is characterized by feelings of arousal and eroticism. Then, as a young wife who has yet to give birth, a mother, and old age. That's it. Women were married at about 18 years old, as they were considered by the ancient Greeks to be, truthfully, useless unless bearing children or under the thumb of a man. Men could be young adults for 10 years, while women only enjoyed 1 year the same. These are the people that they prescribed inside my pedagogy when it came to political science in my master's.
No one ever didn't believe that R. Kelly was in young girls, but everybody's like, oh, they fast and they this and whatever. And that seemed normal to them. Or men didn't hide in the 2000s that they were waiting for Lindsay Lohan and Hilary Duff and Britney Spears and these people to turn 18. And they were open about these things because society is mass consented to the idea that, like, yo, we just waiting for it to get legal. They could be as young or whatever, liking these young girls, these young gaps, as long as they are legal.
We've alluded to women and femmes engaging in similar behaviors evinced by people like Madonna or Cher. Maybe it's my age, but I had no idea of the prevalence of female celebrities having significantly younger partners. You got Cameron Diaz, Demi Moore, Robin Wright, Sarah Paulson, and far more. I really found it funny how little we hear about these instances. Of course, Sam Taylor Johnson is one of the most notable cases, falling under immense scrutiny for her partner.
When the two of you first announced your engagement 10 years ago, there was some drama around it at the time. The stigma was you were older, right?
Right.
How much older?
20-something years. 20-ish.
But I think it would be hard to argue that we don't have the same energy for the women and femmes them who court younger partners.
I think it's viewed in a different way because of maybe like the ways in which women's relationship to power function.
We've heard of cougars in the classroom taking advantage and assaulting their pupils. These heinous happenings happen far more often than we'd like to hear about. But what is interesting is that every time a case like this emerges, there's always a coterie of men espousing how much they wish this happened to them.
Man, what she said when I was good, man. I wish I would have had teachers when I was around.
This is indicative of the very reason we rarely hear of women and femmes preying upon younger men. Our patriarchal desire to portray the masculine figure that is sexually voracious and always open for business even when underage, supersedes our misogyny to pillory or slut-shame women and femmes. Many men and marks don't come out about being taken advantage of, but for the simple reason that what is more emasculating than being a victim?
There hasn't been like a mainstream conversation around sexual violence and abuse and within their, communities and stuff. So even the idea of being taken advantage of or being coerced or the complication which happens to anybody that's been in those positions where you may like it in the moment, but you're having to also contend with the fact that it's like, would you have really done this if you had all the knowledge that you had later in life or whatever? So I think there just isn't a lot of mainstream conversation around this for men to be able to kind of be like, wait, she's 20 years older than you, dude. That's messed up. Like, versus just kind of like, damn, you really got her. That's awesome. When I was in high school, I had a woman teacher end up with one of my classmates. And I think she was like 32 and he was like 16. And it was never, she got fired and I don't know what happened, but it was one of those things that even as a kid, I think we were all, because we were kids, we were all just kind of like, wow. Honestly, I wasn't like, that's cool. But everybody was like, whoa, that's cool. Like, and it isn't until you're older. And like now as I'm getting older, I'm going to be 29 this year. I'm like, that was a...
So in a weird way, the misogyny of men in masks insulate women and femmes from some levels of accountability because the idea of women lacking capacity of crime. Don't get me wrong, they still gonna shame women regardless. Oftentimes, it'll be women doing it actually right there beside men because they've been waiting for a chance to perform a good girl with a good virtuous woman, you know what I mean, for the male gaze. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic.
If women go into spaces and they're looking to be the exceptional woman at the expense of some woman being seen as being the ratchet hoe, I think that's when it comes like a question of autonomy. Is your autonomy coming at the expense of other people? Especially how autonomy gets, projected onto bodies? Because I know as a black man, I'm going to have a double consciousness in knowing that regardless of how much autonomy and independence I know I got, it still matters to individuals and how I navigate the world when they believe they have power or authority over me to influence my autonomy and independence.
But it's also our misogyny that makes it hard for us to accept a woman overpowering or outwitting a boy or man being taken advantage of. It's literally in our language, This word right here, I'm not going to say it because, more demonetization. To satisfy the requirement of it, there needed to be penile penetration. Older women and femmes dating younger men in masks is already a tortuous path that only gets more convoluted when you include race in the mix. The most recent additions to this phenomena is Drea Michelle and Jalen Green, who recently announced that she, a 39-year-old media personality, will be having a child for the 22-year-old ball player.
There is a material gain. There's something to be materially gained from the relationship as well as the birthing of a child, especially because her child is like 1 year older than Jalen Green. The cycle of like domination, power, and coercion, and how once you believe you have a particular status, this means you should be able to will your domination and power to be able to possess whatever you desire. And recognizing that in every one of the instances of the women that we just named, a lot of those women were already in the spotlight and were already possessionized. I ain't even a word, I'm making it up right now. Possessionized by other men that made it normalized. So I feel like once they got to the thing to be like, hey, I'm tired of being the prey. Now I'm ready to be the predator.
There were many posts side-eyeing the coupling between the two, but most of them included a litany of slut-shaming remarks, claiming that she is subscribing to the financial trend of women taking advantage of athletes who are very early in their maturation.
I have control here in this situation, right? I'm safe. I'm going to be able to avoid certain level of suffering that I would with an older man. You know what I mean? Because this is a younger boy. You can mold him. You can run him. You can nav. You know what I mean? And they know that.
But the other side of the aisle claimed that Jalen knew exactly what he was getting into because it's customary for athletes to consort with a particular brand of woman once they get to a particular level of success. In the same way that elder women groom their daughters into accessing wealthy older men, The same goes for elder men in these industries that encourage younger men to indulge in particular women.
I was just in DR, and like that's something that's really prevalent there, like marrying a literal minor, not like 18, like damn, she's young and it's kind of questionable. Like she is 13 years old, and your own mother will co-sign that from the perspective of financial need. It's like, I cannot keep taking care of you. This is a man that is able to provide for you financially, will take care of you, get you out this house, and you will have your life going on a certain trajectory that you as a mother potentially can't help with.
There's been a glorification of younger men engaging with older women for quite some time. Popular media puts Stifler's mom on full display for millions of male teenagers to marvel at.
I was with an older woman for the first time when I was 16. She was 32. I lied about my age at first, but when I came clean, she didn't appear to care that much. Certainly didn't stop our little tryst. By the time I was 19, I was used to older women hitting on me. And when I went away to college, let's call them offers came in. Little things at first, trinkets, nice meals, things like that. But there were those, 95% of whom were cis older white men, that preferred to skip the games. And, well, college textbooks aren't cheap. They reveled in the fact that I was a young, agile black man, and they were older, wealthier, well, not partners, that implies some intimacy, and clients makes me sound cheap, but that's closer to what they were. Without the capital they dangled over my head, we'd have never gotten intimate.
Lest we forget Lil Wayne bragging about his own assault as a teenager, or the infamous Chris Brown being taken advantage of at the age of 8. This doesn't excuse the horrible and heinous things that they would go on later to do in life, but it paints an interesting image of how violence begets violence.
Men are raised and indoctrinated in a society that tells them that, their worth or their manliness is in sex, right? Or is being able to, to dominate women, right? That's why so much of even the terminology we use for sex has everything to do with a man dominating women, right? So men are only allowed to see those things as notches or reflections of their masculinity or whatever have you. And so to express an issue or to that your consent could be violated, or that you're not just a sex machine to have sex with whomever, or to, be ready for all of the advances, or when it is a question on their masculinity, is on their sexuality, all these different things in their mind. So,
of course, I'd be remiss not to talk about Drake Bell, whose assault was discussed recently amongst a crew of other kids who were taken advantage of in the entertainment industry. Drake Bell went on to commit crimes himself. Goes to show that we are all victims and perpetrators at the same time. There's something unique in regards with being the victim and the perpetrator simultaneously. We see too much black and white, and we don't make enough room for the full gamut of what exactly the experience and the human condition allows, because you subscribe to a particular view that is someone doing and then someone being done to.
And when you look at it that way, to me, that explains the cycle of how a lot of older women that have a history of being a part of this trend when they were younger, they viewed the world that way. You feel me? I'm either being taken advantage of or I'm taking advantage. I've lived long enough being taken advantage of. Now I want to, do it. Or it's just like that dualistic binary thinking from baby boy. Hey, you either buying or you selling. Or in a racial sense, it's like, hey, a lot of black people, they sell out for nothing. Or they get this, that, and the other. I'm going to be a different black person. I'm going to sell out for as much as possible. You acknowledge there is a power dynamic against you, and you believe that you can wield some influence by being in proximity to that and affirming it, or you believe you can wield some capital from it by playing with it.
But back to the modern age. A lot of the discourse around gay, asymmetrically aged couples and grooming involves an older man and a young boy. Throughout time, with the help of Europe's consistent worship of ancient Rome and Greece, the dynamic has been romanticized, idealized, and even memes were created that discuss being femboys. Even Plato proclaimed that being a pedo is good, actually. But only if it contributed towards philosophy. There's a much darker side to this when you account for the power dynamics like race and class. Headlines in 2022 blazed with Ed Buck's name on it, a wealthy self-proclaimed political activist and longtime regular 500,000 donor of the American Democratic Party, who, after he was sentenced to 30 years in prison on the charges that he supplied and personally injected gay black men with methamphetamine in exchange for sex, which led to 2 deaths and multiple overdoses. Buck used his money and privilege to exploit the wealth and power imbalances between himself and his victims, who were unhoused, destitute, and or struggling with addiction. He spent thousands of dollars on drugs and party and play sessions that destroyed lives and bred insidious addictions. Apparently, activists and members of the LGBTQA+ community in the state advocated publicly and repeatedly for him to be charged. But their cries and pleas went unnoticed. He had at least 10 victims and would even drug them while they were unconscious.
People with children right now, their own father, their own partner, their own grandfather was a predator in ways in which they've had to kind of maybe dissociate from that reality, compartmentalize certain things, justify it, rationalize it, blame it on the victims, which is to say, I think there's certain ways in which we justify maybe a cis man's nature.
Unfortunately, though, on all fronts, irrespective of gender, financial dependence upon holder partner creates another power dynamic and can easily make way for financial abuse, making it harder and harder for those dependent upon that finance to leave.
The material reality of certain people in these environments is so that there is no other option but this. There's no other abilities beyond education for even work for a lot of these young women. And then if you think about a country like the Dominican Republic where abortion is illegal, if you get pregnant at a young age and you can't afford to maybe have an illegal abortion or whatever happens, now you are a young mom. And now you even need to more now find somebody that's able to help you out because you have no education, you don't have a job, you don't have experience, you have a kid, and now you have to go and find it one way or another.
Kevin Spacey's allegations of predation have come to light, which revealed the harrowing admissions of queer and straight men testifying to Spacey's assaulting them. Now, the complicated nature of a closeted queer white man with money in positions of power and fame wielding it against other white men eager to work in the industry where this behavior is normalized, that would need a whole video by itself.
I just remember just going like, listen, I probably should get going. His face just went very straight. He's like, no, stay. And I said, I'm not gay. I've never been with a man. He goes, even better. He goes, oh, darling, there's nothing like flipping a U.S. Marine who looks like you.
Let's not forget Milo, who romanticized being groomed by older queer men as a means of finding his identity. I even recall a similar situation with Wilde, one of my favorite poets.
Milo Yiannopoulos. And the thing that finally tanked his career wasn't being a Nazi, but it was him saying on a radio show or a podcast that he's okay with sort of 14-year-olds and older men because he's grateful for those experiences because they helped him discover his gayness and all this shit. Really interesting case study that you have like a grown adult saying, and I know some of that is probably coping because you've been groomed, and that's really tragic and sad. But yeah, saying, well, it helped me discover my queerness, therefore the ends justify the means.
What sucks even more is how often queer folk them get groomer allegations, and then you have instances like this where a queer person is preying upon someone else. This can be extended even further when marginalized people use their marginalized status as a panoply to protect themselves from criticism while they abuse what little avenues to enfranchisement we have, whilst throwing our communities under the bus and leaving them to deal with the backlash.
Heteronormativity and how a lot of heterosexuality is normalized in, media, institutions, systems, organizations, and how it's so normalized that we become ignorant to how we create gender violence and sexual violence for other people. I have a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old. They watch Disney. They watch, you know what I'm saying, Nickelodeon. And I think that what happens is we become desensitized to shit that's happening in a way where we don't get to call it out. So if there are gay cartoons on Disney, most cisgender straight parents are going to call it out in a particular manner and say they trying to, you feel me, push sexuality on the kids. But, you know what I'm saying, we can watch like Frozen or Jasmine Aladdin or, you know what I'm saying, Lion King, and they'll have obviously very heterosexual, romantic type shit, and it's not seen as grooming. My point in bringing that up is because it becomes so normalized and naturalized in our society that you get ostracized for wanting to call the shit out, or you get seen as being too woke or too deep because you don't want to be a spectator that's going along with, really what we're talking about, rape culture. And we acknowledging that rape culture exists for men and women. And, you know what I'm saying, doesn't negate the trend that, you know what I'm saying, women and femme bodies are particularly the main, you feel me, people that desperately deal with these impacts of this, you know what I'm saying, rape culture.
It empowers bad faith actors to weaponize these outliers of marginalized communities against themselves, despite the fact that you get far more grooming from cis-het dynamics from as seemingly innocuous as watching Disney movies forcing gender tropes onto infants, to extreme cases like the very politicians that grieve about grooming kids literally being the groomers themselves.
Well-known white supremacist and advocate for pedophilia has been arrested for trying to kidnap a 12-year-old girl. This is 40-year-old Nathan Daniel Larson. He was grooming a 12-year-old girl online and coercing her to run away from home and fly across the country to meet him.
The entertainment industry in particular is home to many predators that gatekeep access to fame behind lock and key of sexual favors and then dangle it in front of young adults and even kids with little avenue to achieve their dreams. As well as the parents who, in hopes of helping their child get what they want, ending up getting something that every parent fears the most.
So you're talking about groomer panic, and the reason they panic is because they see queerness as inherently creepy, even if it's consensual. So trans people, inherently creepy. Gay people, inherently creepy. And the unfortunate as well as it being really bigoted, obviously, but the unfortunate byproduct is that it equalizes everything. If you see all sexual behavior and sin as the same, it's like they think being gay is the same as like abusing your younger sibling. All sexual sin is the same, and this is the danger you get in the queer community, is that if you're a young queer and you're being told it's wrong to be queer, and then you have a much older man, say you're a young gay man, pursuing you, you're being told it's wrong anyway.
Specifically when it comes to financial dependence, there is always one party that maintains power in a way that they can command an audience with young people. Diddy had a 48 hours with Justin Bieber that I won't touch on too much because given the allegations and activity between the two, it's a lot. But Usher, the singer that had the most millennial women going crazy from 90s to 2010s, speaks on a Diddy boot camp where he was exposed to things a child shouldn't ever be privy to.
Starting to act different, huh? You ain't been calling me and hanging out the way we used to hang out.
Well, I mean, you try to get in contact with me, through all my, partners and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But you never really got my number, so. Correct. Okay. My number?
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you my number.
Yeah.
It's 555.
Yes. Okay.
5555.
Okay. 55. You heard that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm here to because you've been a big supporter of mine, all jokes aside. This right here is my young brother right here.
This eventually led to his mother removing him from Diddy's residence. Diddy's most recent victim, Cassie, is 37, whereas Diddy is 54. That's a 17-year age gap in a relationship that lasted a decade. His crimes being so extensive that Diddy began giving artists their royalties and masters. Diddy only gave it back to them if they signed an NDA. Former Danity Kane singer Aubrey O'Day claims that Diddy offered to return the rights to her and her ex-Bad Boy artist music in September of 2023. According to O'Day, it was all in an attempt to keep them quiet about the allegations about the rapper that began popping at the time. I received the publishing deal. I know what it says. I know how much money it was giving me. O'Day claimed that the deal had multiple strings attached. The former reality TV star revealed that if the artists accepted the deal, they also had to sign a non-disclosure agreement that would bar them from talking about their experiences at Byboard Records.
Society has decided they are comfortable with the idea of women experiencing sexual assault or men being taken advantage of or whatever have you, right? Like, society doesn't have a problem with that, but society does have a problem with gay. You know what I mean? So it's like, even though these circumstances, these things that they're not having the moral outrage for, society's fine with those particular they're fine with the idea that young boys are losing their virginity to grown ass women. You know what I mean? That are taking advantage of them. They're fine with the idea that like grown men want women as young as possible, you know what I mean? As long as they're legal, or if they're younger, they understand, or they're 17 or they're 16, or related. Society's fine with all that shit. But what society is not fine with is homosexuality. Like, they said, stop that gay shit over there. Like, so that's really all it's about, right? The reason why they are willing to contend, they're willing to think of the worst case scenario in all situations, but the only one they care about is this imaginary, hypothetical, like, thing that's just steeped in homophobia, is because they're homophobic. That's it.
Now, BBL Drizzy, the artist formerly known as Drake, is under fire for alleged preference for younger women, some being under 18-year-old. I remember specifically when he DM'd Millie Bobby Brown, but you're always still shaking your ass to Hotline Bling, right? In her own words, we just texted each other the other day, and he was like, I miss you so much. I was like, I miss you more. He's coming to Atlanta, so I'm definitely gonna go see him. I'm so excited. About boys, he helps me. He's great. He's wonderful. I love him. This interview, in which Brown revealed that Drake gives her dating advice, ruffled feathers due to the pair's 17-year age gap. That's interesting, the same amount of time between Diddy and Cassie. And shortly after, the actress appeared to address the criticism in a pair of statements she shared to Instagram. Why you gotta make a lovely friendship your headline? You guys are weird. For real. I'm lucky to have people in the business extend their time to help me further my career and offer their wisdom and guidance. I'm very blessed to have amazing people in my life. You don't get to choose that for me. It's nice to have people understand what I do. Now get back to talking about real problems in the world rather than my friendships. Jeez. Sure, Millie. There's just one thing. No full grown ass man has any business texting a teenager about anything. It shouldn't matter if a minor finds a relationship suitable. It's the reason why statutory laws exist, especially when he's offering boy help. We see similar situations like this with teachers asking students to do his hair.
Was this teacher getting his braids taken out by his students inappropriate?
Last Friday, 10 minutes before dismissal time, I decided to live stream my students helping me take my hair out.
So this science teacher live streamed his female students unbraiding his hair during school hours.
Either one of my daughters came home from school and told me that they're unbraiding their teacher's hair, especially if it was a man. There will be a big problem. Either he gonna have to lose his job or she won't be in that class anymore.
Well, he addressed the issue by explaining why he allowed the girls to touch his hair.
For a little context, I had a hair appointment immediately after school and I needed my hair taken out beforehand.
He also went on to say this was a wholesome moment with his students.
I'm fortunate enough to have students that feel safe and comfortable around me. What I strive to do as an educator is be the teacher I wish I had grown up.
Plus, he said a lot of the students look at him as a big brother or father figure. So the internet has expressed their thoughts.
The things that I do with my students, a lot of y'all will be crucifying me just like y'all crucifying that man. But I done have my students help me do my hair. I done have my students help me take down my hair. I done DoorDash food for them and a list of other things. But the only thing I don't do is what I don't be doing, I don't post it.
You can have good intentions and still be wrong. And stop using other people's kids for content.
Even Cardi B chimed in.
Since I have a daughter, I wouldn't want to see my daughter unbraid. If the school district is seeing this video, give him another chance, you know what I'm saying?
Some could see as innocuous, but it's definitely unprofessional and can normalize certain behavior and dynamics that ought not be encouraged between an unequal power balance of a teacher and a student. In light of recent revelations pertaining to Drake's sexual escapades and alleged sex trafficking, his habitual consorting and fraternization between substantially younger women that barely satisfy the age of consent, if at all, gives rise to some seedy conjecture as to what really went on in those seemingly platonic relationships what he had with women. Especially with his proximity to fame and funds, it would be highly irresponsible. It would be a highly irresponsible usage of privilege and power to engage with. Black girls who fall victims to this type of abuse and enter unequal relationships after being preyed upon by men like R. Kelly are branded as fast. Even if you never looked at a person in a romantic context, if your body developed secondary sex characteristics much faster than expected, you were treated as though you were a woman in the Black community. This is shown throughout shows even marketed to kids, like Hey Arnold. The fast Black girl stereotype has sustained throughout slavery and on to today, as it was used to dehumanize the Black feminine body, the Black feminine physique, so that they can be subjugated in an atrocious arrangement like breeding farms. Yes, you hear me correctly. Farms dedicated to producing laborers by way of mating Black men and women. Think about that next time you hear a Black gal get called fast because she was wearing hoop earrings.
If you are okay with being in a relationship with a person that doesn't really value like you, as far as like certain conversations, meeting you as like eye to eye, like a peer, a lot of men don't care to talk to women. Like they don't really care to have a meeting of the mind. So it just makes sense that you're with somebody that's able to kind of fulfill a certain domestic role, but that's not necessarily your confidant or your intellectual kind of boxing partner. It's just a girl that's at home, like taking care of your family while you go and you lead the life that you're supposed to as a provider.
Currently, though, we've got to be honest with ourselves. Age gap relationships are considered taboo because we've grown as a species in spite of the West's enjoyment of ancient Greek principles. In many cultures, it is not considered acceptable to fall in love with someone who is much older or younger than you. From an evolutionary perspective, the drive to have a family can have an impact on who we choose to have a relationship with, both from a biological perspective, but also in the sense of both parents being alive to raise a child, according to Dr. Elena Torini, a psychologist and co-founder of the Chelsea Psychology Clinic in London. In 2014, the average age difference between American hetero couples were around 2.3 years, and in Western states, around 8% of couples consisting of man and woman have an age gap of 10 years or more. When it comes to the queer folkdom, a whopping 25% of male couples are of 10 years or more and 15% for lesbians. Still, we don't think it's all that weird, according to some polls. A poll by Ipsos, the third largest analytics and insights company in the world, conducted in May 2022, concluded that men in the poll were more likely than women, about 46% versus 33%, to list physical attractiveness as a benefit of dating younger. 6 in 10 Americans, 60%, believe it is acceptable for a woman to date someone 10 plus years younger than them, while 71% believe it is acceptable for a man to date someone 10 plus years younger than him. Men are more likely to have dated someone 10 plus years younger than them compared to women, 25% to 14%. Meanwhile, women are more likely to have dated someone 10 plus years older than them compared to men, 28% versus 21%. There's not much energy for young men who are preyed upon by older women. Researchers shed light on an unequal perception regarding the societal acceptability of age gaps in relationships between men and women. Surprisingly, in the poll I referenced earlier, 55% of respondents indicated that they find it more socially acceptable for a man to date someone 10 or more years younger than himself compared to an older woman dating a man of the same age gap. And there's definitely no energy for black girls as there are when it comes to white femme victims. But, what's behind this discrepancy, you may ask? The truth is, it's simply this. The groomer panic thrown at members of the LGBTQA+ community aren't anywhere near a problem as homophobes and bigots portray it to be.
There's so much money to be made and that has been made off of mainstream media, basically creating a lot of panic around homosexuality, transgender people, etc. Just this sort of eternal boogeyman, whether it's an immigrant, whether it's somebody of a different gender, whatever. There's always something that you can sensationalize. And a lot of people that already don't have a lot of experience, that maybe didn't grow up in certain diverse environments, that maybe have certain kind of particular traumas, get really affected by this type of disinformation, that it then becomes, I feel like fear of trans people, it's a literal mental illness, the ways it becomes this hyper obsession. Like when you think about J.K. Rowling, like it really starts to consume and it turns into this incessant need to find this quote unquote boogeyman.
And I'd like to hope that no one uses ancient Greece or Rome as an actual argument, because that would be a misapprehension. And a very ridiculous and insular one at that, I might add. Because there's been little research exploring romantic relationships with significant age differences. One study delved into the normative beliefs and commitment dynamics among heterosexual women involved in both age gap and age-similar relationships by comparing the evolutionary development of our species with current socio-cultural perspectives. Women who were older than their partners tended to be the most content and committed in their relationships, followed by couples with similar ages. And once again, not all age gaps. The automatic assumption that all of these relationships are predatory can also lead to younger partners being less likely to open up about their concerns of red flags or issues that arise in their relationship out of fear. I think a lot of this boils down to the lovelessness of our current romantic capitalist society. And it's simply the top of the funnel of a multi-million-dollar industry of love. Whether it be the sex work industry, rom-coms, or Tinder, there's money to be made off of the love or lack thereof. Bringing me to the cacophony of content creators that have contributed to the rise of gym cells. As a himbo myself, I have been grappling. I've been having a hard time with the dissonance of loving the gym and hating some of the culture surrounding it. How do I strive for progressive ideals whilst being a part of a culture that seems to be home to ableism, anti-fatness, misogyny, and more? Where young men en masse or women and femmes go to better their chances of desirability, but end up becoming even more unattractive in the process. From nofap to looks marks, we getting into the weird world of gym cells. And the only thing preventing you from watching it is you not being subscribed to my streaming service, Nebula. Over here, we making thoughtful and prestigious content that just won't work on YouTube. Like the upcoming amazing sci-fi thriller by Jesse Gender, where two strangers appear in a mysterious room with no memory of who they are, starring none other than Abigail Thorne, otherwise known as Philosophy Tube, who also has the play The Prince on Nebula as well. And between you and me, no, seriously, I can't say this too loud because I signed an NDA, but the Wendover crew has been working on something super special for you that's coming extremely soon. And you may see some familiar and foreign faces in it. Let me tell you that. There's never been a better time to sign up for Nebula. And by using my link, you can get access to Nebula for as long as you and Nebula exist. And that money goes directly to helping me and my fellow colleagues make bigger and better content that you'd have a hand in helping with. We also got subscriptions as low as $2.50 a month. So tap on my link in the description or scan the QR code to gain access to the smartest service in streaming, Nebula.